Almost said it. Happy Saturday night. I never say that, do I? Happy Saturday night. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. And I'm Buttons. And I didn't like what I got for dinner, so I'm going to be right here haunting you until you put down something that's human food. Happy Saturday night, everybody. Thank you for being flexible and logging on tonight. I traveled home yesterday from Vermont and I ended up making it home pretty much on time, but it's just so stressful not knowing what traffic is going to do and all that. We were away for a couple of nights in Vermont to see the fireworks and do the whole 4th of July thing. So thank you for being flexible. Tonight is a different night. Huge shout out to Barbara for 1,000,010 things at least. But a huge shout out for today. The great idea. I wrote to Barbara this morning when I woke up. I woke up early to work on some of the Halloween stuff I'm getting out to people to hook up for the haunted rug book, and said, I don't know what to do for today, and I didn't even have time to think about it. Right? You know how crazy I was in the morning, right? Didn't even have time to think about it. And Barbara said, "Why don't you do an interactive sketch thing with composition?" And I thought, oh, that is so smart since I'm sitting here sketching and doing compositions, right? It's like it all fits together. Thank you so much. It's going to be an interactive show tonight, if you feel like it, if you will. If you feel like cooking and doing stuff, great. But tonight we're going to talk about composition and look at composition. Look how things are broken down. Some of the, very early rugs. Look at the way the composition is broken down. Whether you are someone who likes to do your own compositions or likes to do commercial patterns, doesn't really matter. It still feels good to know what you're looking at. Whether or not you want to do original work, and should everybody do original work? Of course not, right? Some people just have it in them to choose patterns they love and work on patterns that they love. What's wrong with that, right? Other people want to do a small business, or are you gonna? Am I gonna go down? Am I gonna go sit downstairs now? Am I gonna sit down under the table now? Yeah, I think it might be time. What do you think? Oh, I don't know. I kind of like being on camera now that I'm here on Mama's lap. Honey, he too cute. He too cute. I can't stand it. Should I put you down? No, not yet. Okay, one more minute. So whether or not you are a designer and you like doing your own original work or not, it is really nice to know what you're looking at, right, and how it breaks down. It just is another feather in your cap, understanding how composition specifically for rugs work. So while we do the design like class and we try to create designs based on the feel of a certain era, a certain period of work, or a specific artist. There he goes. Oh gosh, there he goes. And in those cases, we're trying to make something that looks like a theme, mid-century modern, or oh, honey, he wants to come right back up. Or did you notice there's no noise here? It's because everyone else is out of the house for this moment. That's why he's on me, like I don't know what. But in this case, we're talking about how composition breaks down. And we're also talking about how very early hooked rugs looked and why, and how those compositions break down, which is a conversation that only rug hookers can have with each other and certainly understand or appreciate, right? Somebody who has some kind of working knowledge of these early rug designs. So that's what we're doing tonight. In other words, if you're thinking, well, I wasn't going to do anything with the sketch pad, but since she can't see me, since I'm not going to have to hold anything up or anything like that, maybe I will grab my pad. Grab your pad. Because why not? Right? Why not? And if you're happy doing your hooking, do your happy hooking and glance up now and then to look at some of the beautiful rugs that I have in the slideshow for tonight. All right, I'm going to stop patting him for a second and see how that goes. He's just angry, I think. Okay, because I don't have a chair for him, and that's always a thing when Mama doesn't have a chair for him, right? So let's see who is here. And yeah, I'm having a nice quiet couple of hours while the kids are out seeing the movie Inside Out 2. I know it's a great movie. I know it's going to be a great movie because most movies are great movies. Most movies are somewhat, worthwhile. Um, my excuse was that I did not see Inside Out 1. And, I don't know what it is because I know these movies are great, but in my head, I've never been someone who likes kids' movies, right? I just don't, I'm not that into cartoons and kids' movies and stuff. I know it's fantastic, right? But they are very happy having a brother-sister time out right now. So hopefully we get the news when they come in. I have a feeling we will immediately get the news when they come in. Catherine, great to see you. Happy Saturday night. It's only 111 yesterday in Hemet, California. That's a big number. That's a really big number. I have to admit, I have not been watching the news the last couple of days while we've been away, and I'm hoping that the heat wave has not gotten regionally worse and scarier with higher tolls, death tolls. It's so scary when it gets that hot. It was insanely hot in Vermont. I never historically think of Vermont as once in a while, but I mean, it was like sustained, right? That we were there for 2 nights and 3 days. It was sustained, intense heat. Do you notice how his tongue sticks out? They told us when he was a baby that there was something wrong with his teeth, and they wanted us to do this surgery to his teeth. And I said, "You got to be kidding me. We're talking about a dog, right? Like, not that I don't love the dog and take care of the dog, but I mean, we are talking about a dog. You want to give him a retainer or what? And turns out it's never been a problem. God knows he can eat like anything. He can eat off your plate faster than you can blink. And but the only consequence of those crazy teeth is that his tongue is always sticking out a little bit, which is so funny. He's such a good boy. He's such a good boy. Becky, great to see you. I know that is hot over there, Catherine. I hope that you're doing all right. That is hard to take. Karen, great to see you. Happy Saturday, 78 degrees. That sounds pretty good in Black Forest, Colorado. Partially cloudy. You get that nice insulation with the clouds, don't you? And a light breeze, glass of wine in hand. Me too. I have champagne. Remember last week when I was at Naomi's house, she had a bottle of champagne. I thought it was like just the wine, but she sent me home with the second bottle. And when I popped the lid, it like flew up in my face. It was a great practical joke too, but I didn't know that it was like effervescent. Boom! It was exciting. And this is what this is. It's so good. He always makes me laugh. He's like 6 years old now. I'm telling you, he's still. Every time I look at him, he makes me laugh. He always looks so goofy. Deborah, great to see you. Happy fourth weekend. It is exciting, isn't it? And Cheryl, cheers, my dears. There's everyone on a gray, breezy night. It is a bit overcast here. I don't know about you all and the rest of New England. I know you're on the Cape, but man, we had the craziest thunder overnight. It was the loudest I've ever heard. I think the thunderclaps. I'll put you down. You go. You ready for rest? Okay. I think the thunderclaps were right over the house. It was incredible. And then I woke up a little early to start working on projects and get some stuff going. And the cat, who I love, Pitter Pat, was laying right on top of my sketch stuff, and it was super irritating. And I was just thinking, oh, how am I ever going to get the cat off my work? And then all of a sudden, the loudest clap of thunder. It was like a cartoon. Like she jumped from a seated position. She's not small. From a laying, like reclining, straight up in the air and off. And I'm not sure I've seen her since. I'm sure she's in the yard somewhere, but man, that scared her. And I thought, did I do that with my mind? Because I was just thinking, how can I get my work area back, right? Because she is like an entity. Crazy weather here. Oh, you have got cranberry wine. Oh, I just love that. 75 is very good. Uh, Orly, oh, good to see you. Hello from Dieppe, New Brunswick, Canada. Great to see you. Super welcome. Happy Saturday night. Oh, great to see you. Cranberry wine does sound fantastic and fresh. Carol, great to see you. I just left you a message. I'm such a ding-dong from Northford. Oh, I think they're back. From Northford, Connecticut. Happy 4th to you, too. Great to see you. Linda B., happy Saturday evening from New Jersey. How was it?
Amazing.
Okay, do you want to come and say hi now so we don't take up some time later? Where's Teddy? Don't sleep in the subway, Teddy. Okay, tell us how it was. How was Inside Out 2? Great movie. Was it the best movie ever? I knew you were going to say that because it always is. It was that good. Was it better than Inside Out 1?
Yeah.
Hard to say. They are both great favorites. There we go. There's a review you've been waiting for, right? Glad that it was fun. Kirsten, greetings from warm, but not like Hats Gallery, warm Vermont. Kirsten, I was amazed at how hot it was. And I guess I forgot from like past 4th of July's. It was hot. It was super dangerously hot. Crazy hot. Super uncomfortable. Maybe I'm just getting old. I cannot stand being uncomfortable in any way anymore. Hey, Ted. Linda B says,
As my
welcome.
servant, I must treat you with respect.
Okay.
Here's a bowl of
Okay, come say
popcorn.
hi, and then I'm going to get going with the show.
Hello.
Was it a great
Great
movie?
movie, yeah.
Amazing. You brought me some movie
popcorn,
theater popcorn.
the best.
You demon. Because you know I'm going to eat all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to eat all
Trust
of it.
me, I had almost the entire bowl.
I get that, man. I get that.
Yeah.
Nothing like movie theater popcorn.
It's so good.
All of those layers of butter in there, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. Thank you, Teddy.
Alright, I'll be back tomorrow.
I will be right here. All right, lots of welcomes. I love that. Melissa, great to see you. Happy. Yeah, I keep wanting to say Friday, but you know it's Saturday. Kathy, great to see you. Good evening to you, too. I'm just catching up on the thread. I love all the friendliness. Gayla, great to see you. Sandy, hello from Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. First time live. It is your first time live, isn't it? Is it because I'm doing a different night tonight? It is great to see you. Super great to see you. I hope our back and forth email helped. We were talking. Sandy wrote, oh no, I think it was Sandy Fox who wrote. Sorry, Sandy. There's two Sandys working on the Haunted Rug book right now. And I was going back and forth earlier today because one of the patterns that I think the other Sandy's working on involves some very fine fingers, like witch's fingers in silhouette. So very, very thin. And she's hooking the piece in cut up t-shirts. I love that. I love that thriftiness. And she said, I'm not sure what to do because I can't seem to get the she's cutting almost like almost an inch, like 3/4 of an inch with scissors, the t-shirt material to hook with, and that always goes great, doesn't it? And you feel good doing it because you know you're doing something in the real spirit of the craft, the real thrifty spirit of hooking. But I said, see how it goes. Try cutting thinner for those fingertips, right? Because they need to be like teeny tiny. But you know, with cotton, sometimes with the ribbing, depending on the ribbing and the t-shirt, the way that it's machine knit, sometimes it's just not going to do something thinner. So that's the thing. I know when I'm trying to hook something very thin in t-shirt material, I always cut strips along with the grain. Sometimes I don't care, right? Sometimes I do diagonal and it gives great stretch. It gives you great mileage, for your material, however much that one t-shirt makes. But if you want it to be stronger, you have to cut with the grain, however the ribbing is going, right? Even if it's not real pronounced, take a good look at it and cut with it because that will give you the most sort of tensile strength, if not the most mileage, right? Because when you stretch, you get a lot more. But when you stretch, sometimes it's more likely to rip. It really depends on the t-shirt, doesn't it? So always a to be continued with that. And, I said worst case scenario, you switch to like black yarn, like a black acrylic yarn that is super, super thin. And you know that will make some nice, long, skinny fingertips for a witch, right? Aileen, great to see you in Toronto. Welcome. And Joyce, great to see you too. Good evening. Heather, great to see you. And Valerie, logging on from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Heather is up here in Connecticut near me. One of my buddies up here. Anita, great to see you. Hello. Lots of buddies on tonight. I wonder if this is just a good night to do stuff once in a while. Kathy, some of your grandchildren saw Inside Out and loved it. I don't know what it is about some of these movies, but they have like this kind of fervor, like it's like the Beatles, it's like 1964 and they're getting off the plane at JFK. It's like some of these movies have such hype and the kids really love them. Maybe I should watch them, right? Because then I would really know what the whole thing was about. Barbara, you are there with your pencil in your hand. You are ready to go. And Judy says, I had a champagne cork catch me right in the chin once. It looked like I'd been mugged. Oh no. This one was just the cap. It just surprised me, right? It wasn't as bad as the cork. I bet that really hurt. That's awful. It teaches me I need to read what I'm doing, right? I always move so fast. I didn't read the bottle, and I just thought it was another bottle of wine, and boom! It was exciting, though. I thought, whoa, what's this? Sherry, great to see you. Happy Saturday night to you, too. And Kirsten says, it has been a little hard to breathe because the humidity is high. It sure is. Super, super high. Whew, it was crazy, but it was beautiful up there, that's for sure. April, tonight's theme intrigued you. Fantastic. Let's go. It is going to be a fun theme. Do the parts that you like, right? Stick with me. Do as much as you can with me and stick with me. Sort of precursor to the night. Disclaimer, anything, I better get this away from me because I'll never be able to stop. Anything that I do on this piece of paper, you can absolutely use. Things that we're doing here together, right? This is for fun. If you see something that you love and you do it exactly, you don't have to ask me permission to use something that we did when we're doing our either online classes when we do the design likes or on a night like tonight when we're just fooling around having fun. Anything that you do is yours. Even if you borrow it directly from what I'm doing, I hope you do. I hope you love it. I hope you use it. And you don't have to ask me about stuff like that. Just have fun. If something turns out great, I am so happy. That's why I'm sitting here on a Saturday, right? I'm hoping that everybody makes something that turns out really great and is useful. Pam, you're here for a few minutes in the middle of dinner dishes. All right, we'll be here. I'm sure we'll be here. Linda, great to see you in Massachusetts. And Karen says 3-cut snip technique for a super thin line. 3-cut snip technique for a super thin line. Karen, can you describe that 3-cut snip technique? 3-cut snip. I'm trying to picture what that means. Give me a little bit more. I think you know a lot of things I don't know, and I'd love to hear this one. That could be super useful. And Sandy says, thank you. I'm doing the same. The witch's skirt is in painted merino. Fantastic. Orange, purple, and gold and pink. I tried the hands about 4 times. We'll get back to it. Lori, great to see you. Great to see you. You know, sometimes it's not the right time for hands. That's for sure, for drawing them or hooking them. And, you know, the rugs for the images, right? I don't need the actual rugs for the Haunted Rug Book, but if you are working on an image for the Haunted Rug Book, or if you'd like to, I still have some. I did a ton of primitives in the last 48 hours while I was away. I realized that's a real hole in my sort of repertoire, right? It's like I've got some kind of a weird limited vision. I love primitives and they're my favorite, but I hardly ever do primitives. So I challenged myself, right, and this fits in well with tonight's theme. I challenged myself to do some primitives to use for the book, not just for beginners, but you know how sometimes when you do something that's super, super complicated and involved, you immediately want to do something that's a no-brainer, right? And that's why I should have some of each thing in the store. So I've been working on that. And if you've been thinking, oh, I'd like to do something for the Haunted Rug Book, and I could get an image to you of a finished thing by September, but I'm afraid of your patterns because they're always involved. Think again. I might have something for you. ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. Just let me know. Maybe switch from t-shirt. Barbara says maybe switch from t-shirt to pantyhose for the fingers. That's a great idea too, because with pantyhose you can get a shred in there. I'm curious to see what Karen says. Pam says sounds interesting. It does sound interesting. Karen, you have so many techniques. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. Before we start, if you see a blue Kia Soul driving around New England with this bumper sticker and a rug hook, it's me. I saw this in Provincetown years ago. Somebody had this painted on their lawn, and I thought, that is my favorite thing ever. So I saw one bumper sticker of it while I was in Vermont, and I said, that's it. It's going to go on the car. It's me, right? It's me. The rug hook in this, there's got to be one Kia Soul in the country that has those 2 crazy stickers. I saw another great thing this weekend. I'm gonna get the shirt and wear it. You know that expression where everybody says, "No thanks, Satan," like "Not today, Satan." I've been saying that a lot lately myself. Every time I get triggered, which is often, "Not today, Satan." Well, I saw a pin at the same store in Vermont where I got the Hokey Pokey that said, "Maybe today, Satan." And I thought that is really funny. That's so. I mean, maybe. To me, I mean, I almost died laughing. Honestly, I thought it was so, maybe today, you know, some days you're just up for something a little bit different. Pam says that is just too cute. Oh, I really love it. So Karen gave us the answer to the, what did you call it? The 3-cut snip technique for a super thin line. Karen says you don't have to use a 3-cut. Oh, a 3-cut like the 3-cut strip. But if you pull up your loops higher than the other loops, okay, along where you want your line, and then cut the loops, use your scissors to spread the loops out. Okay, that is a great idea. So Karen's saying, so forget about it being a number 5 cut. If you pull up loops as narrow as you can, right, you can cut them with the scissors too. And if you have like only primitive strips and stuff like that, and you're like, oh, I've only got 8s, just cut them in half with your scissors. Karen's saying hook them in there and then clip them, because of course as soon as you clip the loop, it's half and halfsies, right? So then you've got like a little line rather than a loop. The head of the loop, you would think like 2 sides of the loop, 2 equal sums create the same as a loop. They don't. Two little sides cut are smaller than the head of a loop when you pull the head of a loop up. You know what I mean? So that is a great idea. That is a great idea. You know, when you're not putting stuff on the floor and you don't have to worry about wear and tear and general use, you can do sneaky tricks like that where you're pulling stuff up. I mean, God knows with the piece I'm working on right now, I'm doing the craziest like two tails and no loop, right? Just a tiny little piece in certain places because I know nothing is ever really going to pull on it. It's going to be on the wall or in a drawer, and nothing's ever going to really pull on it. So that's a great idea, Karen. Thank you for that. That's a fantastic tip. Your line becomes the edge of your wool as opposed to the width of your cut. Exactly, because the width of your cut would be the loop, right? The finished loop. The top of the loop has to be the width. But instead, the width of your wool, which is much thinner, like paper thin almost. That's a great idea. So fantastic. That's a perfect way to reroute this conversation because I'm sitting here thinking, what materials could you use that would be thinner? And you're thinking, let's use the same materials, but you use them differently. Brilliant. That's a great tip. Thank you so much. All right, let's go. I'm going to have one more sip. And let's do this. Let's have some fun. I started getting ready for tonight by putting together, you know, I love to do visual aids and stuff, by putting together some examples of antique rugs. So let's look at those one by one and talk a little bit back and forth about what we're seeing there in terms of composition. And then I'm going to show you how we get there with the composition, what decisions have been made, how you can recreate the exact same thing, or how you can take what you want out of the given design that we're looking at and take it in a different direction, right? That's the thing, to be able to have the confidence and the flexibility built in so that you look at something and you go, I like that, but I don't like that, right? Because if you love doing commercial patterns and you're not a designer, but you're thinking, yeah, sometimes I love something about a pattern, but not something else, it's important to have the confidence to take out a Sharpie and say, this is what I'm keeping, this is what I'm changing. And to just to know that you can change it, that your idea usurps what's already printed or drawn on your backing fabric, right? Because you're supposed to be making something that you love, that reflects you. And if some of your commercial pattern isn't something that's pleasing to you, you should get in there and change it however you want. So let's look at, hold on, let's come over here and let's look at the first rug tonight. So in terms of composition, let's look at some of these together and then we'll break some of them down, not all of them. This is a great early rug, right? This is certainly a 19th century rug. There's a few things going on here that I think are exciting. Let's just look at the way I'm going to sketch, right? I'm going to sketch this and then I'm going to show you what I've sketched and then we'll flip back and forth and talk about it. Let's talk about what we're seeing here. If you feel like sketching, you sketch too, and then I'm going to come on, we're going to sketch together. I'm drawing the perimeter shape. And then I'm lopping off the four corners. You see the triangles in the corners? I'm lopping off the four corners. And now I'm seeing how in the center, it seems like there is like a centerpiece, like it's broken into threes, checkerboard on the top, north, west, and east, not on the south. On the south, right, we have got a little potted plant of some sort or a little fruit plant. So I'm drawing this. I'm going to show you what I'm drawing so far. So let me come back to you here. And then I'm going to go from memory, right? So this is the kind of composition we're looking at here. This is a classic setup for an antique rug. Why? Because this maybe should have or could have gone all the way to the top. Maybe there wasn't enough material of that color. According to my memory, these feels here, the side, and I'll have to check before we go too much further, is a checkerboard. Now, what good is a checkerboard in a composition? Well, if you don't have a lot of one color, it functions as a hit or miss pattern, right? This is hit or miss, checkerboard, perfect. Now, in the middle, I'm not sure, I'm not going to click back and forth, but there's some kind of pot, isn't there? And one big branch coming out of the pot. Now, these are the corners I've lopped off, right? Have you lopped your corners off as well? Let's come back over here for a split second. Okay, and I'm seeing how they're doing it. Very symmetrical. I'm going to draw the top. Okay. Yep, I see. Let's come back over here. I just noticed that at the top here is also checkerboard, right? Did you notice at the top of the tree, the question of how to resolve a treetop is always a question, isn't it? How do you resolve it, right? Because the pattern leading up to the top of the tree looks like this, doesn't it? It's very stylized and it's very symmetrical. And then it's got these big, oversized, almost Magdalena Briner Eby berries on it, right? It's not staggered. It's very symmetrical, right? Little pot at the bottom. You could do your pot a different shape if you want, something more like this if you want, right? And down here there are two animals, right? I'm going to get to that in a second. They resolved the top of the tree by doing this weird mustache, right? Do you want to do that? Up to you. I think these are there too. You might want to do something like that. I don't think that's there in this example, but this works very well. This is a super symmetrical piece. I noticed also that there is some kind of circle thing. Let's look back. This looks almost like a board game, doesn't it? Don't you recognize this could be like Parcheesi, something like that? Let's sneak back over here. Oh, there's 4 of them. Okay, there's 4 of them. So I shouldn't have come so low here because they're here too. And these are, yeah, they're like star flowers. So star flowers are easy. You're just doing something like this. It really does resemble Parcheesi. Now, things that make sense and work with this composition, in my mind, I like filling the corners with these star flowers. Hey, Dawn. I love that. I'm not sure for myself that we need to have these corners and star flowers. We might be a little overkill because we've essentially got this bling, right, as part of the border. We've got these blings, which are part of the border. And then we've got these 3, part of the border. We've got a lot of border. It is an exciting piece, but it has kind of a contemporary feel, the main motif being rather small in the center. Let's look again at, okay, so there's a couple of deer, and the deer are remarkably well done. Very, very small, but their forms are remarkably well done. That brings us to a lot of other episodes. They could be, no, I was going to say they could be moose, but they're not. They're deer. I'm just putting them in as line drawings. Very, very small. They are quite small. So for me, this particular pattern, when I look at it, come back here for a second. When I look at it, I think, wow, there's a lot going on. If I were to draw this, I probably would scratch this idea and think, oh, there's a lot going on. The part that I'm really interested in are these guys, but they're so small, I'm not really reading them that well. They are, if you notice in the original, and I'll flip back, very symmetrical. Well, I wonder why they're so symmetrical, right? Let's complete this thought. This is a great 19th century rug because the way it's broken up is very erratic. We do have symmetry, right? But we do have a lot of fields that are just broken down. This, the sides, the checkerboard, the corners, the background behind the tree, right? It's a lot. Does it look great as a finished rug? It looks amazing. It's completely amazing. You know what I just noticed? There's 2 birds at the top too. Do you see the 2 birds at the top of that weird antennae type thing where the tree resolves itself? There's 2 little birds up there that look like this. Let me come back over here. They are tiny. It's giving us an idea of scale for the rug. There's 2 of these little guys sitting here and here. So interesting. How did they get this kind of crazy symmetry? Well, I'm going to show you how to do this if you like. I'm going to do this quite small. This is my roll of tracing paper. I get this off Amazon. This is probably, what's this, like maybe 14 inches wide. Sometimes I get the one that's 20 something. It's not very much money. I cut it with the scissors. It's a pain, but I can customize how much I'm cutting. And you know when you use tracing paper by the pad, like all paper, you know, you end up the spine cracks with the glue, and then you end up losing a bunch of pieces on the floor, and that's always disappointing. Deborah says, idea. Look at game boards for design ideas. You collect old games. I'm going to do that. Absolutely. That's a brilliant idea for background fills, right? Because we're talking about a composition that relies more than 90% on hit or miss. Now, let's say that I wanted to do this design for reels, right? And let's say I would do it with a ruler, right? I want to make it this size and I want it to be perfect. How can I do that? Let's say I want it to be like this. I use my tracing paper, right? I fold my tracing paper in half like this. And then I typically put a dit dot here and a dit dot here. Sometimes I fold it this way too, right? Just so I know what I'm doing, and put a dit dot here and a dit dot there. So now I know what I'm doing. Now, if I were to, for example, say, I'm not going to screw this up twice, right? I'm going to put the circle here. I broke off the corner. I'm going to break off the corner, drop in a circle. I'm going to do my star flower. You could also copy into quarters. That's why I fold it two ways. But in this case, I'm just going to do halvesies, right? So let's say I've got that in place and I love it. And now I've got this and I love this too. I'm only doing this on half. Here is my basket. I like my basket like that. I'm bringing that up there, dropping that in. Maybe I want my bird there. Let's get the bird in so I don't screw that up twice. Can't remember what way he was pointing, but let's just say it's that way. Got my bird in, and let's say I want to get my little deer in there. I'm going to get him in. He's small, but I'm going to get him in there. This little bouncy tail, right? Now, here is the design for the most part. Right? I like this half of it, right? I like this half. I'm going to keep this stuff symmetrical, right? Maybe I like this, the way that it is. Now, have I got all of the elements? I kind of do have all of the elements. What I can do now, I know the checkerboard's not there, but we're going to hold on that because that's a hit or miss background fill. I just fold my paper over and I trace all the bits and pieces. But because I'm tracing them now, they are coming out exactly right. If I made some kind of a weird snafu or glitchy problem thing on one side of it, it's going to repeat on both sides. So that's okay, right? If it repeats on both sides and I still have symmetry, well, twice a mistake doesn't really seem like a mistake anymore, does it? It seems like if I make a mistake twice, it really is part of the design. The symmetry is there. And I've got my bird here too. Now I open it up because I've been working on tracing paper, and I tidy up my seam. Hey, it's symmetrical, right? It's symmetrical. So you can be sure that people way back when were using this technique, even if they had to, use regular paper as thin as they had or fabric, hold it up to the light, right, to try to get this going. At this point, I would then say, this very irregular design, I'd be putting in my checkerboard, and I would do the same thing again, right? And I would fold again. This is how I just, any of my primitive designs, if you have hooked them, if you've bought them, if you just like to look at them, this is how I do all of them, right? Because once I get it set like this, I can say, well, I'd like the pot a little bit wider, right? I would like these to fall away. I'm going to extend something, whatever, but at least I'm starting with a piece that is very symmetrical. Super, super easy to do. Deborah says, maybe the center could be a tall bird cage. God, is that cute? Is that cute? So let's do that. That's a great idea. Let's do that. Let's come back over here. Let's try that design right out of the gate. Good idea, Deborah. Let's try that right out of the gate, right? I love a good bird cage. So let's take this shape. And I know that this isn't exact. I've got gridded tracing paper, graph paper under me. So if I want things to be exact, I can make them exact. These are all little tools that I have, right? So now we have an exact square. I'm going to do the same thing and fold over. I'm only going to do halvesies this time. Let's say I love the idea of a bird cage. So the question would be, if we're going to do a bird cage, let me bring you right over me here a little bit better. If we're going to do a bird cage, the question is going to be, do we want the kind of a bird cage that you can see the bottom like this? Do you see what I mean? And you could have like a little swing in there if you wanted. But do we want one that shows the bottom, or do we want more like a bell jar like that? Or even taking it a step further like that. So you would have to decide, I want the bottom showing for whatever reason, gives dimension, or I want this, right? So you decide for yours what you want to do. But if I were going to do something like that, I think I would want the bottom, and I would do something like this. Do my fold over. You cannot go wrong with your fold over. You're going to see your design is so good when it's folded over. Even if it's not perfect, the strength of having that symmetry is hard to measure. And I'm going to put one down the middle, right? So I wish my bird cage were fatter. So if I wanted that, I would sketch it like this and maybe fix it up like that. Good thing about tracing paper is I can take another piece later and do a little bit more. I'm thinking maybe I don't like the bottom, but if I do want the bottom, right, the things have to go right to the bottom. Otherwise, the bird is going to immediately escape. Do I want a handle on it? All these kinds of silly questions. Do I want this one to be similar to the other? If I do, I'm going to lop off the corners. Do I want the stars, right? Would I want the stars? And I kind of regret this, but you decide. It is too much like a bell jar right now for me, but I like the idea. I like where this is going. Let's say, I'm thinking this through now. I want this to be folky. I want this, I'm going to turn the fan on. Oh boy, tell me if this is too loud, okay? Oh, that is too loud. Wait a minute. I accidentally put it on 3. Let me put it on 1. There we go. So two things are going to happen. What do I want to repeat from this drawing? Maybe nothing, right? We loved this online, I think. Do we want to recreate this? Maybe. Maybe. But this is a fairly flawed composition in and of itself. This tree is very static and has a fracture quality, but it's not realistic at all. It's not even essentially folky, right? It's really far out there. It's over stylized. Is it cute? Yes. Does it work? Yes. Does it catch your eye because it's distracting and it doesn't look like anything else? Yes. Is it a bit of a Charlie Brown fruit tree? Yes. If you like that, you go ahead and do it. Karen says full border around the checkerboard and corners. Yep, I think that's a good call. Full border around the checkerboard. So if we were going to do that, right, if we want to checker this out, we're just going to. Now, this has potential to be fairly confusing. And you know why? I bet you're ahead of me here. Because depending on how you color the checkerboard, the lines could play, right? The lines could be very, very confusing. Maybe, maybe not. If you've got a different color behind here, you could end up with a very mid-century modern look. Really, really mid-century modern. This is an interesting shape because now that we've got the bird cage, the emphasis between these two compositions has shifted as far as it can shift. In this one, all of this around the edge, the hit or miss, that's kind of like the static color fill, not very important, not storytelling area. This little piece here with the crazy tree and the deer and the 2 birds, this is the storytelling area, right? So here we've got the story, here is all fill. In this case, here we have the story, but we are kind of changing the emphasis on it, right? So, for example, just go out on a limb with me for just a minute, and let's say I want this to not be completely symmetrical. I'm going to go out on a limb. Let's go out on a limb. I'm going to put some birds in here, and they're not going to be symmetrical, right? Here's one bird. Maybe I flip my paper around like this, and maybe I do a second bird here. We are looking so mid-century modern right now that it's kind of crazy. You see what I mean? Now, with this composition, the question is going to be, am I going to fill the birdcage area color-wise in a way that it can support this checkerboard? Or are the lines of the birdcage going to compete in a confusing way with the checkerboard? If I feel like that might happen and I don't dare, even if you are thinking, oh, well, if I outline it, it's going to work. If you outline it, it is going to work, right? But let's say you think, no checkerboard for me. I'm too worried about this checkerboard line breakdown and this vertical line breakdown. Too many lines for me. If you're thinking that and you're thinking, But I love what I drew with the birds inside the bird cage. That's really cute. Maybe you want the door to be open or something, right? So there's like, it has like a, and maybe if, you love birds and animals being wild and free like I do, maybe you want to do something like the birds are flying out of the cage in the background, right? That would work too. So they're coming in, they're going out. You do a bit of storytelling, because maybe you drew the bird cage and then you thought, oh, but the idea of a caged bird, right, that brings up all kinds of other associations. Well, if the birds are coming and going, right, it becomes more of a hotel than a prison. So do your storytelling according to your taste. You could do this kind of a thing with birds in the background. Wouldn't that be interesting as a design, right? Have birds in the bird cage, however you want that to work. And you could also do a square bird cage, right? Interesting. And you could have actual birds outside. How do I know they're outside? Well, because they're flying, right? If you give them wings, they're flying, right? So maybe you get away from the idea of caged birds if they're actually busy and flying idea. Or you could do like a wallpaper behind them with birds that's very static and pattern oriented, perfectly pattern oriented, right? Whatever you do, I think you would need to keep this shape pretty solid in the background. Other things that you could do if you're thinking, I love this, but I'm scared to do the checkerboard, you could do another classic rug hooking thing like lamb's tongues, right? How cool is that? That would be a super easy fill to do, something very traditional for us as rug hookers. So going from this to this was not much of a jump, was it? It's a very easy jump because essentially this is the same composition. We're looking at something with a big border that has something in the middle for us. In the case of the birdcage, which I think is a great inspiration, for me this is more accessible to us, and this can be a much more contemporary look, right? Because we are essentially looking at a composition where this is the main shape, and then Bob's your uncle, wherever you want to go with that, right? Easy peasies. The more you use tracing paper, I think the more you're going to love it, because as soon as you break out the tracing paper, you realize you can go asymmetrical or perfectly symmetrical depending on what your intentions are for that piece. You can trace the same piece over and over, literally 100 times, and sometimes I do, until I have it exactly right. What else could we do with this specific? Let me cut some more tracing paper. With this specific idea to make it a little bit more balanced, right? What this particular design in rug lacks, in my humble opinion, right, at this moment, is balance. I think this was done in a true hit or miss spirit, and I think it was done the way that it was done with so much breakdown of color because the person maybe didn't have a lot of colors to choose from and had to be smart in the way that they used hit or miss. That's why these early rugs are so valuable, right? Because they're so different. What can we do if you love this rug but you're thinking, yeah, I want to do something like that, but I want to fix some of the design problems in it because I have more wool, right? And now I know I can cut up t-shirts. The person who made this original rug wasn't in such a position. Let's say we wanted to do this as something that was a little bit more user-friendly. Why don't we again fold? It's not quite in the middle, but close enough. And I would suggest if you love the center piece, right, keep the center piece, but maybe enlarge it a hair, right, something like this. Now let's flip over. It's only a hair, but in the grand scheme of things, when this is full size, it's going to make a big difference. Let me drop my tree in there again. Let's think about that tree. I might want to, in a perfect world, create a pot that's a little bit more recognizable as a pot or a vase. So I changed the shape a little bit. I'm working upside down here. I love these Parcheesi corners, but I'm not a fan of the Parcheesi corner with the triangle corners. So maybe what I really want to do is something like this, right? And then I would get rid of that line. So let's say I did want to do that. I like the snowflake thing, but I want to do something more like this. Right. Incidentally, hold on, let me do this. Incidentally, you can work like this, right? If you want things to be exactly the same shape, I fold top to bottom as well. And let's say I do this. right? Now I've got something that has a bit more balance. We're going to get rid of these lines, right? But now I have something that has more balance. Let's fuss with the tree in a minute. I still like the star flowers. Well, good. You definitely keep the star flowers. Maybe you want them like this. Maybe, right? You do your star flowers however you see them. I'm not going to trace everything because it takes too much time, but you know, if I were doing this for real, I would be tracing that into all four corners. I feel like I'm already a little bit more balanced. The next question is going to be, all right, sorry, OCD is not allowing that. Let's just do this. Okay, star flowers in place. Now, we have something that almost looks like a grandfather clock design, right? Isn't that interesting? Karen says, each of the four corners are squares instead of lopped off, and the center is a rectangle, either centered or grounded on the bottom. Yes. Yes. All of those things, all of those suggestions will make this composition more stable. This is not helping the composition. And then the scrunching in of a circle above a triangle is not really helping this composition, right? It's beautiful the way that it is, and it's great to reproduce these, right? Because they are perfect in their imperfection, right? But if you are more of a perfectionist and you want something with the same feel, the next question you want to ask yourself is, even if I want a symmetrical design, I've got my pot, maybe I even want a bigger pot, right? That's up to you. Maybe I want a pot that has ears on it like this, right? So whatever you like. The next question is going to be, do I want something like this tree all the branches are equal going up like this, like it's very ornamental, or do I want something that is more graduated like a Christmas tree? If you want something that's more graduated like a Christmas tree, right, you're going to do different heights of lines going down, right? I don't necessarily want to do that at this moment because it's not the holidays and it's hard for me to work outside of the holidays. I might want to do something like this. So bear with me for a second. I do like me an odd shaped tree. If I try a tree this shape, right, and then I cross over in anything you want, this is kind of like a soft pear shape. If I want something like that, right, and then I want to continue this kind of motif, I could do the exact same thing, but maybe I want to do it like this. Now, it might be that when I get to actually making it, I don't have the border in place. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. That's another choice that needs to happen. So then it's almost like a leaf-shaped tree. Then I'm talking about a completely different shaped tree, and the branches, instead of looking like a kind of metal ornamental tree, are looking more like ribbing, like ribs. That can make a slightly more contemporary looking tree. It might be that I do want to add a bird or two, symmetrical or not, right? That would be up to you. So I really am using similar elements in both of these, right? At this point, this tree, right, can have a few things going on. I don't know that I would want to add anything under here, right? Like I don't know that I would want to stuff two animals in there. I might want to put one or two birds on the trees. It might be that I want to add more berries to the trees, right? Just have a lot more fruit, make it very decorative. It might be that I do want to do the checkerboard border, right? Which could work a lot better now that this is a bit more tidied up design-wise, right? That's possible. But I might also want to do alternately a border. I was going to cut it in half, but I won't do that. I might want to do a border that's more like clouds, right? Like there's clouds here. It's the outdoors. Maybe the sun is up in the sky or something, a bit higher than that. But you know what I mean? You could do something that's very decorative and not super hit or miss. You could do something that's more literal, like a sky behind this. You could add a second border to this piece here, right? This literally, no pun intended, the sky is the limit, right? Same composition idea completely. So, and think about, thank you, Deborah. Think about, you could do a Magdalena tree, right? So let's go one step further, right? And then we're going to move on to a different composition idea. Let's do one step further. Let's take the same composition. I'm going to turn it on its side, right? So I'm going to do this with a landscape orientation rather than a portrait orientation. I'm going to do my same jazz. Now, I don't think Magdalena did this. I'm going to do my same jazz where I mark my top and bottom. And with a Magdalena tree, it's going to look more like this. Right? So if you do that, and then you finish tracing, you get that stump. It's almost like a mushroom stump. That is her signature. And then you draw on however many of those you want. And you can make them symmetrical or not. She really didn't do a lot with symmetry at all. So now we've got a Magdalena tree, which we all recognize, right? If you're a rug hooker, you probably are familiar with this classic motif because Magdalena is the original, the classic rug hooker, you know, from the Victorian period. Let's come back over here, right, to the original design. Now, I have a tree in the center. If I wanted it to resemble this kind of design, again, I would do something like this to box it off. That is possible. Right. Now, I've got this compartmentalized the same as this. It might be that I haven't centered it well, right? So let's come back to that. I might not have centered it well, but what would Magdalena do with this composition, having not centered it very well? She'd probably do, she would not do something symmetrical, but let's say that we are going to do the worst dog ever. Right? Worst dog ever and worst dog ever twice, right, to use up that space. Okay. Now we're talking about a composition that's already looking a bit stronger. What if I want to come back to some of the tropes of the first design? This isn't a bad one to do that too, but I would only do that on the top corners, and you can see why, right? Because they're already lopped off according to the design that I dropped in, right? The inner border, I've already lopped that off. Interesting, right? Because your dogs might be better than mine, or you might have two dogs, and you might be thinking, uh-oh, we're onto something here. Do I want to checkerboard the edges? Maybe I want to checkerboard the edges, right? Maybe I still want to keep some tropes from that first piece that we looked at. Maybe I do want to drop in. If I want to drop in the circles again, that's such an odd motif, but let's do it. Let's do it because the tree is so round. Let's do it. I'm going to drop in a circle like this, right? That I'm not squeezing like this composition. I'm not squeezing the whole circle in because it doesn't fit, right? So I'm squeezing in part of the circle. And you can see it's still going to work. I can put in my flowers like this, like these little kind of pinwheel flowers. And does this piece still have the same feel as the original piece? We're getting away from the original piece, but it does. It does resemble the original piece. It definitely does. The more repeat motifs you add, right? The checkerboard is very important on that first piece. There's no getting away from the fact that the checkerboard is important in this piece. It's very notable, right? It's really what catches our eye. But my point is, if you don't love everything about this piece, the only thing you love are the flowers, you can take those flowers somewhere else, right? The only thing you like about this tree piece are the dogs. You can take them somewhere else. You could take the tree somewhere else. Oh, I just like the checkerboard. I have lots of noodles to use up, right? There we go. Karen says, I'm drawing a 5-tiered topiary tree. Let's do it. Let's do it. Karen, that's a great idea. Let me get some more tracing paper. Let's do it. I love me. I'm not going to actually do tracing paper. Let's just do this one by hand. That's a great idea. Let's do it. These are the unlined index cards. Now, I can do my tracing paper on top of this if I want to. That's a bit big. Yeah, we'll leave it for the time being. Now, I love this idea. So let's say we're gonna get even further away from this. All right, but I'm still thinking about this in this design. I like the idea of doing a topiary. Let's start. Nah, I got to do it with tracing paper. Sorry, I'm such a creature of habit. Let's do a little more of this. I'm an animal, I know. All right, let's do it. And if we're doing it like this, for some reason I always need a border. I can't work at all without a border. It's like a real mental problem. I'm tidying up my station here. I'm going to do this next. And I love the idea of a good topiary. Karen's doing a 5-tiered topiary. That's crazy. Let's say I have a little potted thing here, right? And then I'm up here, and I've got one. Now, if I was using the folding technique for this part, it would be even more symmetrical. Here's a great topiary. Now, do I want it to feel like this antique piece? Well, if I do, what am I going to do? I'm going to do this. This looks like a lot of greeting cards I've seen, I have to say, and that's not a bad thing. Right? You know you're onto something when your work starts resembling. Forget what that nice brand of greeting cards is. Do you know the one I mean? That has a lot of like silver and gold on the cards. They're always really pretty. So something like this is a great idea, right? I did a design like this in one of the books. Oh no, I ended up putting it in Magpie. It's going to go into Design Like 2. Just in case you're interested in this idea, I did something that was like this. And instead of the balls, I put an animal in between each one. I can't even remember what I did. Let's do like a cat. Right? I think this was in the first Magpie times. And then what would go on top? Like, well, the bird really should have gone on top, right? Let's do, what's an easy animal to do? We'll do an owl. Right. Definitely could be better. But just an alternate idea, right? Doing something with a topiary of animals. And then we're working this area again. What are our problems this time, right? What are our thoughts this time? Same as before. Bring you over here. Same as before. Same thoughts as before. How am I going to fill the background, right? Do I want to fill the corners, right? If I wanted to do round corners for a change instead of the sharp straight lines, that's possible, right? Do I want to do the pinwheel thing again, or do I want to do more like this, more of a classic rug hooker's scoop, like a lamb's tongue? Could do that. And then what have I got left over here on my edges? Get these lines in here, right? This is still a composition that is absolutely ruled by something green in the center, right? And then it's just a question of resolving problems everywhere else. I substituted the corner lamb's tongues, right? They're like the rainbows, for the compass flowers or the prickly flowers. I forget what I call those. And then same question, what do I want to do with the background of this, right? And that is the eternal question. Would it be interesting on a piece like this, right, to kind of do a hat tip to this and do something? This might not work, right? But we don't know if it doesn't work until we try it. What if I break this tree in half and put these things over here like this? Could that work? Sometimes when I'm working on designs and shapes, and you know, I literally, for all of the art training I have, I just don't know if something's going to work until I do it. So I don't know if that works or not. It has a completely different look having split that tree in half, but it does have kind of a fun celebratory look. It's not bad. If I hadn't drawn this here, right, we could have continued these lines at the bottom and done these in all four corners. And then these corners kind of mimic these lines, don't they? How clever, right? It's like, was it clever, or was I just fooling? I was just fooling around, right? But you don't know until you start fooling around that we can go from here to here. We could do this composition using these two deers and these two birds, right? And just put them into this configuration. This bears a resemblance for sure to this, right? In terms of composition. Round shapes in the corners, carved out central part, strong central bar, right, with story on it. In this case, the story is the tree. In this case, the story is the topiary. I like the idea of this topiary thing. What's fun about the topiary, it's very, this one looks very Italian, doesn't it? You expect to see like lemons and things on there. I never do lemons, but you could do something really cute with different fruits, right? Like oranges or whatever. That could be a cute fruit tree kind of configuration. Now, some of the ideas we could do for a border like this, right? We could do something like, I'm just thinking this through. Say we wanted to do a classic rug hooking trick, and on top do something that says 20, I always have to think about what the year is, or your initials up there or something like that, right? Now we've only got side borders to think about. If we're happy with what we've done here, and of course I'm not, we're just playing, but if you're happy with what you've got going in the center, Karen, yours probably looks a lot better than mine, then it just becomes a question of what do I want to do in the borders? What can I do, right? If I play, I'm looking at this cutout line here. Maybe I'd want to do something like this. Maybe. That's super geometric, right? That could be two different patterns, two different colors. You could put lemons, alternating lemons in here, right? If your theme was like a little lemon tree, who knows? The Bremen, oh, great one, Valerie. The Bremen musicians stacked up. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's clever. Let's do that next. See, we might not even get past the first slide. That's the thing about these shows, right? I go like hog wild. This is one of the traditional borders that we're always looking at, right? The kind of zigzag border. That's always a possibility. Sometimes adding a strong border like this. You could always add text. How do I compare thee to a summer day, right? Whatever. Something to do with trees, right? Isn't there a poem by Rudyard Kipling just called Trees? Maybe I love that poem and I want to put text into the border, right? That's super fun too. Maybe I want this to be night and I want the border to be day. Maybe I want the border to be day. Wouldn't that be interesting? What if this was night? Interesting. And what if, okay, wait a minute. I have an idea now. I have to see this through. Hang on. Hang on. Let's just try this. It's not going to work really well. I'm going to cut some more paper in a second. But let's say I've got this here, and I'm happy with my topiary. Right? And let's say I'm going to go for this and maybe I'm going to put my initials, right? I always do my initials like that because it's two D's. So I'm happy with whatever I have here. Let's say on this border, I don't have much of a border there. Ooh, wait a minute. Maybe I want to do like a rolling Italian countryside. And maybe there's a bunch of trees in the countryside. Maybe it's like a vineyard, do you know? Maybe there's like a little chateau kind of a building or some little outbuildings. You see what I mean? And then up here is a cloudy sky. Could be symmetrical, right? If I fold it, it's symmetrical. What if I wanted to do something like this with like little ledges of tree? Oh, wait a minute. If they're Italian trees, they've got to look like this though, right? What am I doing? They've got to look like this, like the little cypress trees, right? What if I did this kind of thing in a border, symmetrical or not? That could be really interesting. Nice black background or nice dark background, and then beautiful lit up day with the rolling countryside. That could be gorgeous. Let's look at one more iteration of this design with the Bremen Minstrels, right? Let's do it. I'm going to start from scratch. Telling you, I go through, the reason I need like this much paper, like I order this constantly, is because I go through it like an animal, like an absolute animal. But it is fun. And I know that I'm not squared off or anything, but when I'm working on stuff like on a cocktail napkin or laying in bed, 90% reclined, it's not symmetrical, right? I square it up later on my grid paper like I showed you. I square it up that way. Let's say we're going to do Bremen Minstrel Times. How would that look? Here, remind me what the animals are for the Bremen Minstrels. My Halloween pattern, maybe I've been working. No, never, you're definitely not, Deborah. You're working just right. We've got to get those Halloween patterns to the front. Not that there's any rush. There's no rush at all. So what is it? Like the donkey. I turned my phone off. I'm guessing it's like, what does a donkey look like? What kind of, donkey has big ears, right? Like ears like that, right? Yeah. I'm doing super stylized, and then I'll show you. Donkey's something like this, right? Something like that. Maybe hair like this. I'm trying to think of what's... Oh, the dog. Okay, so then the dog. Let's see. So I might have the dog facing the other way just because we don't want it to get looking like dirty, you know. Okay, let's do the dog. And then I think it's the cat. Now, I would want it much more centered, right? I would want to be way more thoughtful about the way that I'm doing this. But just for funsies, let's do it. And then it's like a chicken on top, isn't it? Something like that. Like a chicken or a rooster or something. Now that's going to be hard. It's got a big wing and a big fat body. Well, that sure don't look like a chicken, but it has the essence, doesn't it? It has the essence. So let's say it's kind of funny, isn't it? I mean, it's not squared well. Let me have a sip of wine. Look at this a little bit more. Now, what can we do with the background of a composition like this, right? You could do, this is, I think, an Italian fairy tale. So again, you could do the Italian countryside. That would be super cute. You could do the bell jar, right? You could definitely do the bell jar. You could have the animals breaking the border, right? If you wanted to, you could have the animals breaking the border. I'm not super well set up for that, but let's say I wanted to try that and have them kind of, right? It's always interesting when you're breaking the border. Now, this isn't symmetrical. I'm drawing upside down, but let's just go for the feel of it. Let's say we again, oh, I like this. Let's say we wanted to do something with a real storytelling feel. Like maybe we want the sun on this side and the moon on this side to show how long the musicians have traveled. Because remember, they all have different problems. Like the donkey's old and he can't work, and doesn't his owner want to kill him or something like that? Send him, like, not to the glue factory, but something awful. And same thing with the dog. Like their owners don't want to care for them anymore. Cat as well, and they all happen to be talented musicians, which in itself is fairly incredible, isn't it? German. Okay, it's a German story. Interesting. You know, would it be neat? I would have to do a lot more looking at I like this, right? Storytelling, because they travel day and night, don't they? Until they find like an abandoned house. And there's the abandoned house happens to be being robbed, doesn't it? Or lived in by robbers or thieves or something, and they end up, you know, solving a crime at the same time. Amazing, but super cute story. I like this for myself because it does give you the idea that this is a journey and they've done quite a bit of traveling. I have a couple ideas for things that you could do, and you could do them both in theory. On one side, you could have like mountains and a road, right, running through, like mountains after mountains after mountains, with like a little kind of road running through the mountains, right? You would do it better than that, but you see what I mean. On this side, you could do the trick we did for the last one, where you've got tall trees with the illusion that they have been traveling through woods, and maybe they're trees like this if we're talking about Germany, right? Maybe we're talking about more like evergreens, lots of this kind of stuff. But when you start adding tiers of interest, right, like rows and shapes like this, right, it really pops the central motif. So this is a nice piece of storytelling that's a bit more contemporary, because if we continue with this kind of, wait a minute, I'd have to work it out, obviously. But you could have these two worlds collide, where on one side there's a path going through the mountains, right? And on the other side is all this rugged countryside that they've traveled through on their journey to save themselves and form their own sort of little society. You've got the journey and the road, and it's just all here, right? This is such a great piece of storytelling. And essentially, we are using the same design as, did I throw it out? I think I might have thrown it out already. I threw it on the floor. Um, yeah. Oh, wait a minute. I got it. I got it. It took us many iterations, but maybe this is the story that we want to tell, right? Or maybe not. But we got from here to here, and you can see, right? You can still see the relationship between these two drawings. This is way more contemporary and has a way more children's book feel to it because we've put a lot of thought into the storytelling aspect of this piece. What was going on in terms of storytelling with this piece, right? The person who made it was thinking about what colors do I have, right? What designs, motifs am I capable of doing, right? Maybe this is meant to be like a family tree, represent a family tree, something like that. This person who did this older example was way more limited in terms of, the colors that they had and probably the designs that they could access in their head. They were more limited than what we are now, being able to just go onto the internet. To just go onto the internet and say, I want to do something about the Bremen Minstrels or about, I don't know, the Smurfs. And you can just look it up, copyright. You can just look it up and get going, right? So we have way more possibilities now. But it just goes to show that this is still beautiful. I still want this rug. If this rug goes up for sale, I would buy that rug in a snap. But from this composition, we were able to create the topiary Karen. That was a great inspiration. The tree, I wanted to talk more about this one a little bit before we move on, right? Because these two are quite related still. The other topiary, right? The animal topiary. Let's do the chronology, right? 1 to 2. This one to, actually this one to this one, right? And we still kept the corners and all that, right? And then we went this one to, and this is when Karen said, I'm doing a topiary, to this one. This one is just play on that one, so same one. And little variation, right, brought us to the idea of the animal topiary, which brought us to the idea of an actual story. You see how we are humans, right? Human nature says we like to tell stories. We like stories, right? Some people like this more, right? And to be honest, I love this, right? This is just straight up folk art. It solves problems. It uses materials up. It makes a lot of sense. But same composition in theory, right? If you saw this one in a gallery, you'd think, gosh, that reminds me of something I've seen before. It's probably this one if you've seen it. Interesting, right? Let's come back for 1 second before we look at I had about 30 examples tonight, but obviously we're not going to get to them all. Are some of you doing some drawing out there, or is this something interesting, or is this something silly? I just want to show you with this particular tree, right? I do stuff like this a lot with the folding. I just want to talk about shapes of trees, because while this isn't a tree, part of the storytelling fun of this piece is that it feels like a leaf, right? So let's just take a leap and say these are all trees, right? I'm doing this one like this. Let's do trees in different ways, right? And I'm making them all the same shape, so you can do different shape, right? But let's just explore this. I could do this and this, and it really ends up looking like a leaf, like what I did here, right? Even this, right? Still feels like a leaf, but if we have it to scale and there's a house this big, then we know this is a stylized tree. So that's always a lot of fun. You can also do stuff like this, break up the veins, right? And then you've got something that looks more like a tree. One of the things you want to think about is, do I want to bring the branches to the edges? Do I want to do that, right? Because that creates something that looks stylistically, the more you get in there, the more lines you have, right? This looks very different than that. They both work. Do I want a tree right? Where there's really just symmetry, like that first tree, maybe fruits, fruity tooties, something like this, right? So even within a tree that's shaped in one way, there's lots of possibilities. Maybe I want a tree, and I do this one a lot, that's actually shaped like a leaf. Well, how do I know that that's shaped like a leaf? Again, perspective. If this house is this big, then that's a tree, right? It's a suspension of belief. This has got to be a tree because of its scale. At least whimsically, it is masquerading as a tree. So good enough for us, right? Okay, good. Let's look at the next. Next example, and then we'll come back together and have one more little sip of wine. Let's see what I pulled for numero 2. Okay, so this one might not have as much play for us. Let's just talk through this one. This is an interesting antique pattern, isn't it? I'm going to draw out my border. This is what's called a golden rectangle. If you remember from art class back in the day, right? Golden rectangle has specific proportions. It's almost like it's a big fat square, but it's just a little bit longer. The reason it's called a golden rectangle is because it's perfect on the eye. If you look it up, you can find the proportions to it. This is maybe too much like a square. Also maybe the angle that I've got going. So I've just got the outline of this in. Let's look at what's going on here. We have got I'm just tracing it a second time so that we can play with it twice. We're not going to be on this one for over an hour, I can guarantee. Not that it's not interesting, it's just limited. So for this one, I can see a few things going on. I can see, if you're going to draw this one with me, stick with me here because it's not all interesting, is it? I'm going to do one of these again. Well, first let me do this. I noticed, let's look at the very edges. Yeah. I noticed it has a few single lines. Oops, sorry, I meant to come here with you. A few single lines like this. It's got a couple of solid borders, and then it has a triangle built in. So let me get that on both halves. Now you might be thinking, well, I'm going to sit this one out, which is absolutely fine. It's very easy to discount abstracts and geometrics as being not super interesting. But I'm going to show you they can be interesting, right? This is just a vehicle. Let's look at what is going on. Okay, it's the same on the bottom. So let's repeat, rinse and repeat. Geometry and composition is a vehicle for whatever your story is. My story might not be an oval, right? I don't think my story is an oval. Let's look at the kind of oval. So this is what I've got so far. Karen says, do you think the clipped edges come from or instigated the corners that you licked? You know, Karen, that's a great question, like whether you're putting stuff into an album. I think that the idea of doing these corners predates photography, so I don't think so. I don't think so. Postcards were not around yet, and photography, mainstream photography, I think is going to be a little bit later. I think we're seeing a lot of this with like toll painting trays. It could be, depending on the timeline and regionally, it could be. I think the corners in general in hooked rugs, I think they're a device for getting more color in, because people who were designing rugs at that time didn't have training for the most part, right? 99% of the people don't have any training. And they're looking at an empty canvas that looks like this and trying to think of, not everybody's super creative, right? What they can do to get started. And this is at least something. It's not, we're not talking about a blank canvas anymore. We've got something going on. I think it's more that than anything else. That's a great theory question, right? That's a question like in theory, what do you think? Hard to say, really hard to say. One of the interesting things about this composition is that we're used to seeing ovals in rug hooking, but we're not used to seeing this orientation. This doesn't make much sense because it doesn't make much technical sense because we're looking at a rug and the composition is, from this vantage at least, It's a landscape orientation, meaning long sideways, but they've got the oval going top to bottom. So it's like, if they had tipped the oval and made it a little bit bigger, right, we might have been on to something. A little more filling up of the space. Not that this isn't interesting, but you see what I mean? It's not the perfect fit, right? I had a friend for a good part of, she's still one of my great friends. I hope she's not watching. But one of the things that she always used to do when we made jigsaw puzzles was there would be two edge pieces together. I've probably told you this story before. And she's a very smart person, right? This is why I never could understand. She would always take the two edge pieces and put them together the wrong way. And I always thought, I'd never said anything about that, right? Because I've never tried to never ever be mean or, whatever. I always thought, this is interesting because she is smart. There's a reason why she's doing this. There's something, we're all hardwired differently, right? There's some kind of a disconnect where she's not saying to herself, wait a minute, I'm onto something. These are both edge pieces and they're the same color in the same part of the puzzle. They might fit together, right? There's a very good chance. So it just goes to show not everybody who is looking at a blank canvas is going to say to themselves, well, since the piece is large side to side, why don't I make my oval side to side? Well, this person said, let's make the oval this way, right? So we immediately have to make a decision with this particular drawing. Do we want to go the traditional way, right, which is going to create like a much more typical rug hooking design, or in this case I am going to do what the person did with this rug, and it's because it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge. It doesn't make any literal sense, but it is a challenge. So I'm going to try it. You go the other way if you want to go the other way, because if you're thinking, I don't see how I'm going to resolve that, it doesn't make any sense, I feel you, it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to see if I can resolve it, and I don't know that I will be able to, right? I don't know that I will be able to. I got myself an oval, all right? So you could see that was not a super good use of space. Barbara says antique boxes often had brass triangle fittings on the corners, like campaign furniture. Those are two great references. You're absolutely right. That's a really good thought, right? When you're talking about brass fittings and brass findings and stuff like that, hardware is a great thing to look at, because if there's one thing everybody had, it was bits of furniture, wasn't it? So thinking about what kind of furniture made sense, that's a great point. I have to say, I already love you, but the fact that you bring up campaign furniture is really interesting, because campaign furniture, by definition, is the furniture that we use all the time now. We just don't call it campaign furniture. Things that closed up really quickly, like tents and chairs and tables and things like that. Because if you were campaigning, you would be traveling, but you would still need to sit in a civilized place, and you would want pop-out chairs like director's chairs, and they would have metal corners and things to protect them, so they didn't start looking shabby, right? Because if you were campaigning and saying, you should pick me for president, let's leave that alone, you wouldn't want to be sitting in a shabby chair that was unraveling while you were sitting in it. So they had metal tips and caps on a lot of stuff. That's a great reference, and that's a great design idea as well. So I have got something kooky going on here. Now let's look at what they've done in the middle. This piece to me reeks of, let's figure it out as we go along. Can you see that there is a sub, chests also had corners, great call, yep, absolutely. There is a sub design in here that looks something like this. I don't know that I want to stick with all of this design because it's not all good, right? It has caps like this. The reason I put those in pencil is because I think they did that because they were trying to stay balanced. It has a bit of a subframe like this, doesn't it? And in the corners, they've tried to do stuff with flowers. So this is the breakdown of this particular rug. Now, I'm looking at the same thing you're looking at. Where can we go from here, right? These are let me make them a little bit, let's fill in the flowers first, right? Let's give it the best chance. A little bit of floral in each corner. A couple of leaves, right? I'm making it a bit symmetrical, which I could do even better with my tracing paper. I'm really reluctant to put these on because to me it looks like some kind of a serving dish, right? I'm very reluctant to do that unless they're on all four sides. I'm okay with dropping this line in, right? That makes sense to me. So essentially, this is what we've got. And then they broke it up further, right? They did borders within borders because it seemed to me with this particular design, the person was stalling for time. Let's take another look. They were just trying to fill in space, and they've got straight hit or miss stripies. I already screwed it up, didn't I? Because this line isn't really there. That's because I'm doing it. That's cut off, right? So I had to do that. The hit or miss fill is like this on the sides, right? They're just filling stuff in, quite colorful, because they're trying to fill stuff in. What are they doing on the sides? They're doing more lines of color, filling in. The color's very, very light. It's not doing much to pop the composition. Oh, it might have faded, Deanna. It definitely might have faded. Hot air balloon, great idea. Let's go there next. Let's definitely go there next. Now, what is going on with this composition? Because in terms of proportion, we have our drawing quite similar to this composition. Now, this is what they've done next. It's not a bad idea. They've done one of these, right? And they thought, ooh, okay, that worked. Let's do more of that. And then they put a little dot in the middle. Is it the worst? No, it's definitely not the worst. Is it the best? It's probably not the best. Barbara says, wondering if they designed it as they were going along. I think they had to have been. It's not fantastic. It's not the worst. I think we're suffering from this, which is going to help us with our next iteration with the balloon. But that makes no sense to me at all. The fact that it's top to bottom makes no sense to me at all. This is great, right? The idea of a hit or miss background, great. Corner triangles, sure, why not? This is problematic, right? Because it doesn't have the kind of weight, right? If this is, we can't help but look at what's in the center. And what's in the center is a polka dot. Like, I'm not kidding, right? There's a polka dot. Okay, with a circle around it. That's maybe a little bit better. But it's very limited, and it's set in the satisfaction it gives you. Because your eye is scrolling around all of these different aspects of it. And it is interesting because you know that it's old, right? So it's dear to our hearts because we're rug makers, and we are loving it and feeling it because it has that old time feel. But if you were going to recreate a rug, would you choose this one? Because it seems to be suffering from quite a few different problems. Design-wise, it's not super strong. Let's just see this through just before we go to the hot air balloon and say, what could we do to save this design, right? I'm okay with the triangles, right? That part is okay for me. I think we have got to do this, and I think it has got to be bigger. Now, let's say that we do want the handles to the, the potluck dinner tray. Let's say we want them there. For me, if they're there, I'm sorry, they have got to be here too. For me, they do. Now, this is making more sense to me, right? And I will even go along with all of the extra lines. I will even go along with this, right? That's clever too. But if we're going to do that, I feel like however you're filling this in, right, for the eye to see, however you plan to do that, you have got to give us something as a focal point in the center. So here we go again with your initials or the year. At least that makes sense to me. At least that makes sense. Now, I don't mind the flowered corners, right? I don't mind them. But we could do some other stuff that design-wise, I think, let's just do half of it this way and then we'll do the other half another way. Let's do some stuff that design-wise, let's pretend this is this dead center, right? So we're just looking at this half. That makes a bit more sense, right? If I want to fill this in a hit or miss way, I might want my dark triangles. Maybe I want that. And maybe I want, I'm still troubled by this, right? Because that's a real thing. Maybe I want to resolve it like that, right? With a shape like that. Well, at least now I've created a situation where I could do echo designs within, right? And have some stuff like that going on. I've also created a situation where I could do some directional hooking, right? We're still talking about a geometric, but I can do some things to this piece that make it a bit more interesting to look at. Maybe, right? It's a stretch, right? This is not a super complicated design. There's not a lot going on that lends itself to any storytelling. We're still talking about a geometric. Let's say that I just love the tray design and I'm just married to the tray design. I can't live without the tray design, right? I gotta have it. Gotta have me my tray. So if that's the case, well, okay, so then maybe you want to drop a pattern into it, right? Maybe you, because this is so regimented and rigid, right? It's so geometric and rigid. Maybe the thing that I need is to soften it up with some nice soft leaves that aren't exactly symmetrical and have a little bit of a soft contemporary quality to it, right? A rug that looks like that with my initials in the center is a lot different than a rug that looks like this, right? Is there a place for both of them? There's definitely a place for both of them. Probably not in the same rug, right? This is full blast geometric. This is, I like part of it, but I want to do something a little more organic, right? So you can still do designs like this. I would have gone even larger with the oval, to be honest. You know, I have to say one positive thing about this rug is we are looking at a rug with an oval that does not have the scrolls and the flowers, right? It does have the flowers, but they're so small, you can't even really read them as flowers. But, you know, you have to give it to this person. This is different. There's definitely points for being different. Carol says, could they have made the rug using the stylized formal garden design? The circle with the hedges, you know, that's really clever. That absolutely looks like a formal garden. It's like a aerial shot of Versailles. Carol, that's a great thought. That makes a lot of sense. I think you're onto something. I think that makes a lot of sense. And this goes to our conversations about W.W. Kent, right? Where we were saying, like, remember the Friday nights where we were talking about his book and the idea of sorry, I'm very distracted by my hair because I accidentally did my roots like dark brown. Luckily, it only lasts for a week, right? So it'll go out to this pretty, sorry, super distracted. Very big disappointment 5 minutes before the show started. Carol, I think that's a really smart idea. Where do people get inspiration, right? That was one of Kent's big things. Where does inspiration come from? You know, that makes way more sense to me because remember in Kent's book, he said stuff like, cave walls, right? Cave paintings on walls. Probably not. I forget some of the random stuff that he said, and you know, we were kind of talking back, right? Which was disrespectful, but it academically interesting too. And a lot of his theories to me didn't make much sense. Now, a garden design does make sense. That makes perfect sense to me because we're talking about people who are Europeans, right? Or have grandparents who are Europeans, or we're also talking about an age, if we're talking about rug hooking as 1860s and after, people who traveled a lot, right? Think about Mark Twain, think about Dickens, right? Think about Benjamin Franklin even. These people traveled a lot. So would they know formal gardens? Yes. That's a great thought. They would definitely know formal gardens. So the dot in the middle is probably a fountain. This is amazing. Yes, that could well be a fountain. That could well be a fountain. Now I'm starting to like this design a lot more. This is the year of the labyrinth. Did you all know that? It's actually the year of the labyrinth. So we're celebrating labyrinths this year. I know we're talking about like a more symmetrical formal garden, but this could be a cool pattern to do with a symmetrical labyrinth around it. Or you could keep the flower beds. Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. If we're going to do this, let's do this right. So let's tidy up this design with I think this is an absolutely correct theory that we're talking about formal gardens. So if that's the case, let's do this right. So here I am. Let's get this in place again. And of course, there's tons of references online to different formal gardens, what they would look like, the aerial views, drawings, and photographs. And this is still lopsided, right? But let's keep this in here. And let's say that this is some kind of a hedge. Now, if that's a formal garden, that hedge would be broken by something. So maybe not in our design, right? For all intents and purposes, maybe this makes more sense. I love the idea of a fountain in there. If that's the case and we want this to look like formal gardens, I think we have got to do this again. It would explain why there is so much border design, right? Because we're probably talking about box and different kinds of topiary hedges, right? So that makes more sense now. Now, the top and bottom still don't make amazing sense to me, so I'm going to hold on that. but I did notice that the corner flowers looked something like that. Did you notice that? And they were like fills of flowers. Oh, thanks, Dawn. So if that's the case, right, I'm gonna do the trick of this. I just want to see this through, because see, this is why we need to spend time together, because this pattern more than made no sense to me. It irritated me because I didn't understand, in my stupidity, why it looked so bad. Well, now that I understand what it is, right, does it make it visually look any better? Well, no, not really. But I think a couple small tweaks, right, already this feels better to me. It feels a bit more stable. Now, the fact that they did this probably means that there was issues with having the right amounts of colors in things, right? It is a classic hit or miss. So, yeah, they probably filled in where they could fill in. But it does look like there was an attempt to do a shape on those sides, right? So that makes sense. I would have to really look at Formal Gardens to figure out where, oh my God, you know what? I wonder if this is what they were doing. Like a walkway like this. Ooh. Okay, that makes more sense. I feel it needs to be tidied up. Holy mackerel. You all are so smart. And I am less, right? Because this is the original, and how I complained, and I still don't understand this. I got to say, maybe they're benches or something, or like greenhouses. I don't know. I don't know what those are. Those throw me. This makes more sense. And being the year of the labyrinth, that could be a really cool design to do, right? You could even labyrinth out the corners. I'm liking it a lot more. Oh, sure thing, Valerie. I'm liking that a lot more. Interesting. Interesting. Let's do one more variation on this design, and let's do the hot air balloon. I like that idea. So if we wanted to do a composition that had the essence of this, but we wanted it to be a hot air balloon, we have to fix some stuff. So let's think about this. A hot air balloon is a super fun motif. I just actually drew one this morning, as luck has it, right? I'm going to keep the same shape, right? I don't know if I want to put the corner tabs in, and I don't know, I have a different intention this time. I don't know if I want to do any of those extra lines. Let's think first. Let me have a sip of wine while we think. Just kidding. Okay. Carol, that was smart. That was very, very good. If this is going to be a hot air balloon, we have to change its position, right? So I think it would have to be like that. Do you see what I mean? If it's a hot air balloon and it has this kind of a shape, and that is the basket, we would want to drop the basket a little bit and connect. So now we have something that does look more like a hot air balloon. Where do I go from here? Do you know that Barry Manilow song? That is the eternal question, isn't it? So we have got a totally different composition. I'm going to raise the stakes for myself and give myself an extra complicated challenge. I am going to keep more of the original composition. Let's see. Let's see. I like the hot air balloon. Now, a couple of things I want to ask myself right out of the gate. Do I want one hot air balloon, or do I want more in the distance? And if I want more in the distance, I might want to be careful and draw them first. Maybe. I don't want to overdo it. I think I might be overdoing it. And I think that's too big to boot. Turning into a little Ralph Cahoon over here. Maybe that's something better. So maybe like, could even do different shapes, right? But let's just say, kind of staggering them, and this one's going to be even smaller. Okay. So I love a composition with multiples, right? Now I could do, yeah, Around the World in 80 Days, exactly. I could do like a picture on them, like a giant sheep or a giant pig, right? I could totally do a Jim Shore and pattern up all three of them. Or I could do stuff like this, right, to all of them. A little bit less on these because there's less surface, right? Of course, these would be a lot larger. And then you know how they're all, I'm going to do cross hatching because we want that to be fairly dark. You know how they always have different patterns, like stuff like this, and then you repeat and you get lots of color options. You know what I mean? They all, every hot air balloon has got like a different thing going on. So you could do something really fun with your patterning on them. Now, I have created so far a composition. I've kept elements of this, right? I've kept this round shape in the center. I've added multiples. Multiples make a strong composition. Now, what if I were to just for S's and G's, lay this on top and say, could this be a hot air balloon that is flying over Versailles and it has a beautiful formal topiary garden under it? Absolutely, it could be. Absolutely, it could be. And that would be adorable. And maybe that is what I want to do. Alternately, what if I wanted to do, because I already have asymmetry here, what if I wanted to do, Deborah, you say yes to everything. You love all the ideas. I love it. What if I wanted to do a composition that was symmetrical, like underneath? Now that I've created asymmetry, maybe I'm worried that my composition isn't going to be very strong because I have asymmetry, right? There's two little balloons. They're at different heights. They're slightly different sizes. Maybe I'm nervous and I want to create symmetry in the background. Well, if that's the case, why don't we drop down like the English countryside back here, see how that goes. And I'm going to drop the same lines over here. Try not to draw over any of my balloons, right? So now I've got a fairly stable background. Now, if I really wanted to pop the lines that I just dropped in, right, I could do like a little tree line in the distance, like this. Right? If I wanted to pop all of the lines, there could be little tree lines in the distance, right, just to kind of make it look like a landscape. Maybe I want it to look like the kind of a landscape like the classic English landscape, right, where it looks like a patchwork quilt. Now, how pretty would that be, right? That would definitely work with this kind of composition. Everything underneath it is either in rows That's a very cheery composition for sure, right? And maybe some of it's like, you know how when you see these, then you get rows going the opposite direction? Now, you'd have to really take it easy on color, wouldn't you? Because the hot air balloons, right? You'd really have to take it easy on color. This would be a great kind of rug to do like, you know, for a child or for 3 children or whatever. It would be a fun composition to evolve. Thinking about where to go with it next. I don't want to overdo it, right? That's the thing. I don't want to overdo it. I'm thinking it would be a great composition for a rainbow. You know, I know that's like the low-hanging fruit, so I'm not going to do it. But I can see for a child's thing a rainbow quilt. I can also see big fat clouds. But if I do big fat clouds, I'm going to be very careful that they are not attached to anything, because there's a lot going on here now, right? So I do want a few clouds, but I don't want them to be cut off, and I don't want them to be touching anything because I'm too scared. Right? Maybe that looks a bit too matchy-matchy. I think it does. But I don't want to do too much with that's terribly matchy-matchy. But I don't want to do too much with overlapping because I'm too scared that the bottom part is too busy. I hate the clouds. I hate the clouds. Maybe they are overlapping. Maybe it's just a crazy cloudy day and there's just more going on in the sky. You'd have to work out that sky. But you can see, you could evolve this, hey baby, into a rather cute... No, because I'm talking. I haven't had a chance to touch my popcorn. You want to say hi? We're doing some... give me a chance to have some of my drink, too. Let me have some of my drink. There she is.
Wait, look at my shirt.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, it has mushrooms on it. That's okay. The mushrooms are for now. Yeah, nothing weird. Thank you. Nothing weird. Okay. She's really interested in looking at herself.
No,
right?
the green screen.
Oh.
Do you not see the mushrooms are see-through?
Yeah, I do. I know. It's all creepy and weird. Well, you know, this is...
What is that?
Well, it's a
Well,
hot air
it's
balloon.
probably I was gonna say it's probably a hot air balloon because of how much you were talking about them.
It's a hot air balloon. Yeah, it's kind of a fun. It gives me that kind of 1960s, 1970s poster. Look, there was so much going on with hot air balloons. Let's take this one step further, right? Because it's already quarter of. Let's try this again as a slightly different composition. Maybe no corners. All right, let's do no corners. All right, so I already screwed this up, but you just have to look past that. So why don't we say we're going to do the same thing, but I'm going to put the balloon slightly off center. Okay. Still like the balloon, slightly off center. I'm going to want to do something with the countryside again. I'm just thinking it through. I'm thinking about some of the hot air balloons have, let me try to picture them. They have some horizontal. I'm thinking about Ralph Cahoon, the painter Ralph Cahoon from Cape Cod, who did a lot of stuff with mermaids. He would often do stuff like this and then do like this kind of stuff on balloons, or make it look like netting, scalloping. And he did a lot of cool designs for hot air balloons. That might be something to check if you're looking for ideas for hot air balloons. Ralph Cahoon, spelled like this. Right, so that'll be a great inspiration source. So I've got a wild balloon up here, right? And I can always put, if you're a stickler for detail, country fair, this is a great one for the country fair, Karen. Great idea. Country fair is the next theme for Magpie Times. So this would be a great one to evolve. I'm just going to put a little person in there with their hand up waving, right? Maybe a little hat on. So it's very hard to see, but I would be with a bigger piece, right? His little hand is up there waving. That could work, just so it doesn't feel like a runaway balloon or whatever. Now, I'm going to go for the same kind of composition here. I'm going to stick with, I'm not going to do it symmetrical this time, right? So I'm going to make a departure. I'm going to do I'm going to do what Karen said. I'm going to do no, I want it to look like it's from a great height though. So I'm going to do like, but I'm not going to do it symmetrical again. Let's see. I have to see if those lines work. Now I'm thinking about, if you were up at a great distance, could you see, for example, could you see some of these guys down below, right? Because we love our sheep, don't we? Rug hookers love the sheep. Could we see some of these guys? I don't know. Does it matter, right? Do we need real perspective? Circus tents. Ooh, interesting. Ooh, circus tents. Okay, so let's see. Circus tent would be something like this. It'd be something like that. Maybe a few of those. And maybe there is a, like a Ferris wheel. Ooh. Trying to think of how that would go. Something like that with chairs at intervals, right? Something like that. Have to figure that out. And it would have some kind of a metal stand, right? That could work. Ooh, interesting. And then maybe in the distance there is another, you know what? Because maybe that, the people are out. They are also sometimes checkerboard. I've seen checkerboard ones. Maybe the people are out who are giving Death Wish balloon rides. Just kidding. I would never do it, but maybe you love it. Maybe you would do it. Circus tent, I think, has to be blinged out top to bottom. We've got a country fair going over here, don't we? Maybe it's night, maybe it's day. I know the balloons go out at night too, because I've seen them at some of our fairs here. This is absolutely adorable. Maybe a brook? Yeah, why not a brook? Right? And then, of course, the brook will be a little bigger. And if there's a brook, there's probably some vegetation growing along the brook. Got a good God's eye view of what's happening there. Maybe we want to break up the front with some trees that are a little bit closer to us. Right? Maybe balloon glow. Is that a thing? Yes, when they light up the balloons at night so you can see all the colors better. Yeah, that's a really cute idea. I really like this. what is the relationship between this and this? Well, I mean, you know better than me. We went from point A to point B together, right? Carol's ingenious thought. Well, Karen's ingenious thought first about the corners got us thinking about the corners. It's important to think about every part of it, right? Because it's not. I know I say this a lot in classes. It's not so much what you choose, but that you do choose, right? If you're dropping things in, um, there should be a reason, right? You should have some kind of a reason for dropping in, for example, these, right? That to me is fairly meaningless and senseless. It makes a little more sense now with the idea that this could be a garden design, and I really believe it is a garden design. But from one to the next, we managed to create 4 designs that are quite similar, right? Sorry, there we go, there we go. Quite similar in how they feel, right? Now, how does like a formal garden resemble a country fair? Well, it doesn't exactly, but if we were playing that game where I describe a drawing to you, um, I would describe something with this big circular oval in the center. That's something that all 4 compositions have in common, isn't it? Let's do one more really fast, right? Let's do, because I never thought that this would last us this long, right? Because that was such a boring composition. But let's do one more, right? It's Saturday night, why not? And if it's too much of a difficult one, we're going to skip it. This is super fun, though. I have to say, this is super fun. Whew. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's not back off of a challenge. Let's go for it. I've got my Post-it card out. I am going to, now this is a one-way composition. So we are not talking, if you're doing your tracing paper, right, you're not going to fold it into quarters. It's not that kind of a deal. So I've got this, I've got my border in place, and it's all going to go in the same direction, this particular composition. We have got, it's pretty equally broken up. 1, 2, we've got 2 borders before the center. So let's see. Now this is not going to be perfect, is it? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were with me. And then there's 2 border lines. Okay, so come back over here. Let's see what we've got. We have got a border design that's quite interesting. And what really piques my interest are these curly cues here. Did you notice these? Oop, I did it again. Oops, I did it again. These curly cues like this. Now, without that scroll in the center and the brown background is really grounding us, isn't it? I mean, this looks a little bit 70s. I don't think it is. I think it's much earlier. But the brown is really grounding us in that big piece of metal work. The scrolling in the center is very ornate, very architectural, right? It looks like metalwork. But if I take that piece away and I keep the waves and the swirls, right? Because these are already there, these are already built in. We have got something that without the metalwork part that suddenly looks like it is about to be a water composition, doesn't it? Now, this is kind of interesting, right? I have to admit, as much as I love rugs, to me this is not super interesting. But even the most boring line drawing, composition drawing, and I'm not saying the rug isn't lovely, it's lovely, right? It's got lots of hit or miss fills going on in the scrolling and the lines. Very pretty. It's got a lot of stuff going for it. But it's not the most interesting composition. This is way more interesting to me as a blank canvas because you know what I have to do next, right? You know what I have to do next. This has to be some kind of an underwater scene. Should there be fish here? Should there be a sea monster? Should there be mermaids? Should there be all of the above? Should there be seashells? Should we treat this composition, which has one sort of orientation, right? This doesn't really make sense. Well, it could, but it's very different. This to me makes more sense. Let's say we were going to create a Magdalena, Briner Eby kind of a composition, but in other words, we're going to put in a whole bunch of elements that are crammed together. but it's going to have a nautical theme. So let's do it. So let's say we're going to do wind and waves. Absolutely. You could even be extending. Well, let's do this. I'm going to do this first. Let's see. I don't really know what fish look like, so this is bound to be awful. But let's say I'm going to put some fish in that have stuff like that going on. Netting. Ooh, paisleys. These are all great ideas. Let me put in, I'm going to put in a couple of fish, and then I'm going to do some of those ideas. This damn thing is almost out. Here we go. Let's see. And you know how some of the fish have lips? Right? I always think that's funny. Right, so I've got a couple of fish with different personalities. Let's just do 2 for now. Guys that look like whales too. That would be really cool. Also, things that are coming up over the surface would be cool too. Like, right, because then you could really bling out their tail above the water. That would essentially break the border. Right, so then some of our other ideas, let's say we liked this, and I'm going to do a Magdalena, and I want to fill it with some other stuff. So let's say, for example, I'm going to fill this area with coral. So I'm over here, and I'm going to do like, sorry, I feel like there's a bug on me, and it's driving me crazy and freaking me out. I think it's probably a hair. Okay, coral. Okay, that's a weird piece of coral. That's a terrible piece of coral because it's supposed to look like a tree, right? But I didn't really plan well for it. We'll do another one over here. Right, still bad. So pretend those are fantastic pieces of coral.
For your second course meal, I made you a peanut butter sandwich.
You made me a peanut butter sandwich?
Yes.
Did you make you a peanut butter sandwich and then you didn't want it?
No.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay, thank you so much, baby. I'll have it as soon as I'm done. Thank you, baby.
There's no jelly. I couldn't find any jelly, so.
That's okay. I'm gonna enjoy this immensely.
Okay.
So I've got some coral in here. What if I wanna also put, for example, seashells, right? I'm doing a Magdalena right now, and I'm filling in stuff with nautical theme. Maybe this is a better place for coral. I'm determined to get this coral right. Right, that's better. So I'm just jamming in a bunch of motifs. I like the idea of netting, right? If there's dead areas like this, talk about checkerboard, right? You could get a ton of netting in the background. Right? That could be a super cool motif. Super cool motif. Paisley, right? That's a great idea as well. Right? You could just literally fill this whole field with, I'm trying to think of what skinny, I'll just do like seaweed. Right? That's one of the good things about underwater, right? Everything fits. But I took a composition just now that was super boring.
Do you want sugar on that?
That's not sugar, that's celery salt.
Oh, damn.
That was quite boring with all of these waves, right? And I decided to fill the center field with busyness. Now, one problem before paisley spouting like a whale, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Let me try that. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, so that would be like a traditional whale. I see what you mean. Okay, let's see if I can figure that out. Maybe a rounder whale would work. Possibly. It's a good idea. This is a good working idea. But this was a very tough composition, right? This is a very tough start because this is all presumably hit or miss, right? Waviness. Now, in a finished composition, if I really wanted to do this, I think I'd be wanting more to put one row, right? Make the border, essentially the top and bottom of the borders, make that smaller. In this, about a third of the composition is the action, right? In a proper composition, I think even if I wanted to keep all the same ideas, I think I'd want to create more space for paisley whales, right? Or whatever. I keep forgetting to draw the mouth. But however you wanted to work it with your fish or your whales, you would want, I think, more of a canvas, a larger canvas than a third, right? A third is not enough. But it could be a great idea for doing all your underwater stuff and your seaweed, and maybe there's a mermaid in the mix, right? You could get a couple of mermaids going in there. Maybe they're holding, I don't know, a shell or whatever mermaids hold. But yeah, I like the idea of the net fill for the background too. That would be a super great geometric fill. Great idea. The whales would be like an Escher-like design. Yeah, the way you could, so when you do, so Karen's describing an art theory idea where you say to yourself, I'm going to do this right side up for a second, that I'm going from, I already did it backwards. You're going from one shape, like a paisley, right, to another shape. That's what Escher did, was like evolutions of the same shape until you got closer and closer to what you wanted, right? Closer and closer to a whale shape. And then finally, maybe it is, I forgot the mouth again, more of a whale shape, but you would need to add some kind of a tail. But yeah, Escher went from one thing to another thing in a series of line drawings that that transitioned it, right? So interesting idea. That would be really interesting. Something like this could be a great sort of not literal evolution, but you could go from paisleys on one side to less paisley to more fish to really whale, like a school of fish moving, and in the middle it's interrupted with coral or white or coral colored or seaweed or other plant life that grows up and gives you some verticals, because what this composition is very strong in is horizontals, right? Even though they're like this, they're horizontals. What we need in this composition are some verticals, right? And maybe the way you get verticals is by crossing over here and creating plant life coming up from the bottom over the waves. That gives us verticals, that gives us interest, because just the horizontals, right? In this case, there's scrolling in the center, but you remove the scrolling and we've just got a lot of horizontals. Tough composition to play with, right? But we even did something fun, I think, with this piece. Now, okay, so if I'm going to take the calories to eat this, there better be 10 times more peanut butter on this bread. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. It was very sweet that he made me a sandwich, though, isn't it? I've got a sandwich and movie theater popcorn. This is why I am not losing weight. You see what I mean? Well, this was insanely fun. I had about at least 25 more slides to show you. I thought we were going to go through them like this and be super bored. But it turns out that when we talk things through, we have so many ideas. Everything just comes to life, doesn't it? It's exciting to brainstorm like this. Even though it's not a Zoom thing and I can't hear you, I can read what you're writing and you're coming up with some incredible ideas. It's great to look at composition in this way. Again, whether you're a designer or not, it doesn't matter. It's theory, right? It makes your brain happy to think about how things work and to be able to look at even the simplest and oldest drug compositions and say, I think I know what's going on here, you know? And with the insight that we have as rug hookers, and we know how hard it is when you're trying to match colors and you don't have enough of one thing, we even understand that layer of difficulty, the technical part of it, that a maker would have to experience. So just looking at only the design part of it tonight was super, super fun. I have to say, I think this is one of my favorites of the night, but I also quite like this one. Nothing comes from nothing. Well, that's not quite true, is it? You can really, really create many evolutions of the same drawing from one simple geometric. And maybe that's a great kind of challenge for yourself. If you ever find yourself bored and you don't like feeling bored, look at some of the most basic hook drugs, take some of the elements apart like we did tonight, drop in some other stuff, see what you can see what you can see in there. Brahmin musicians, hot air balloon, light bulb, right? What can you see in there shape wise? That's a great creative exercise. We don't always feel like drawing, we don't always feel like hooking. It's a great creative exercise to be thinking about design and the way it works, because you might be sitting at your commercial pattern tonight after you log off and saying, there's a big huge sky here, what can I do in the sky? And maybe some of the things we talked about tonight will help you come up with some ideas, right? Not that everything has to be super busy, right? But purposeful. It doesn't matter what you choose, it just matters that you chose, right? Even with filling in commercial patterns, still a huge amount of creativity goes into that. It was super fun being with you. Wait until I see all of yours. I can't wait. I can't wait. I hope you all did some great stuff tonight. And again, feel free to use any of these ideas at all, right? Completely yours. I'm putting all of this in the trash. I've got enough problems and enough to do right now. But it was a lot of fun working on this stuff together. And I will be with you on Monday at our usual time, our summer time, which is 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll probably complete the Priscilla Bozell book, because we still have much of that to look at. And she was such an amazing 20th century hooker. Post in our Facebook group if you feel like it, anything that you got to work on tonight that you were happy with. Be looking for a couple of classes. I'll get those up early next week. If you are interested in working on Halloween stuff with us, just send me an email at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. If you love super busy compositions with lots of details, I have that. If you like super easy compositions that are very primitive and very simple lines, I have that. So you are very welcome to join us, whether you are new to us or you're new to hooking or punching or whatever you want. Still very happy to have you participate in all of our group projects, including this one. So be in touch anytime at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com. I will see you at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday, and we will have some fun then. Have a great time.